god. Look at this thing. Look at this. Oh my god. Oh my god. Out of an old newspaper dispenser. It's brilliant. I'm not gonna take any of them, but I just had to rearrange them. There's the Spiderwick Chronicles 1, 2, 3, and 5. Beyond the Spiderwick Chronicles 1, 2, 3. Notebook for Spider. I don't know what these are. Like, I've heard of them, but I don't actually know what they are. And then these two look related. The Long Lost Map and the House of Mirrors. I'll just be sobbing. Okay, so you guys have seen the little libraries, free little free tiny libraries that I've gone to, and so now I'm going to show you the books that I've picked up from them. My little library stack. All right, so the very first one that I picked up was The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. This is falling. Sorry about the boring background, by the way. This is my bedroom slash sound studio behind me. My office is a mess right now. I heard about this book from Jess Owens. Love her channel. If you've not seen her, please go subscribe. She's amazing. She talked about this book and I really liked how she talked about it. This is the story of Henrietta Lacks, who's a Black woman who her contributions to medicine cannot be overstated, but none of the contributions she's made was consensual. So I'm gonna read you the blurb because I've not actually gone through the book, and with my goldfish brain, I'm not gonna recall things correctly to describe them properly. So her name was Henrietta Lacks, but scientists know her as Gila, H-E-L-A, Gila. She was a poor Black tobacco farmer whose cells, taken without her knowledge in 1951, became one of the most important tools in medicine, vital for developing the polio vaccine, cloning, gene mapping, and more. Henrietta's cells have been bought and sold by the billions, yet she remains virtually unknown, and her family can't afford health insurance. Which, if you couldn't tell that this was about an American, there you go. This phenomenal New York Times bestseller tells a riveting story of the collision between ethics, race, and medicine, of scientific discovery and faith healing. and of a daughter consumed with questions about the mother she never knew. Doctors took her cells without asking. Those cells never died. They launched a medical revolution and a multi-million-dollar industry. More than 20 years later, her children found out. Their lives would never be the same. Now, from what I understand, and if I get this wrong, I'm so sorry. Please Google her. But I'm going into this blind. I don't want to Google too much. I'm going based on Jess's impressions and how much how impactful the book was for her. That made me really want to read this. But from what I can remember, Henrietta was hospitalized, I believe, with cancer. She had like 5 young children at the time that she was hospitalized. So some of her children were so young, I believe they don't remember her. She sadly passed away. She did not make it. But what she didn't know is that doctors were extracting her cells and storing them, and then would continue to use them over the years. So the argument is that, well, her cells have done this amazing things for medicine and for the human race and for science, and so the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, for those of my Star Trek fans. But the ethics of taking the bodily autonomy that is so inherent as a human right. You have a right to your own body, you can volunteer to donate an organ to somebody, but you can't ever have somebody come to you and say, you have to donate your kidney, or you have to donate part of your liver because, you're a match for somebody who needs an organ, even if it's for a relative, even if it's for your own parent or your own child. You cannot be forced into giving up part of your body or having your body used for something that you don't want it used for. That is autonomy. So she never gave consent for her cells to be taken, for her cells to be used in this way. And it was hidden from her. It was hidden from her family. So many years later, some of her now adult children find out that their mother's cells are the building blocks for things like the polio vaccine, cloning, and gene mapping, like major advances in science and medicine, all non-consensual and all non-compensated. Her family is still in such poverty, they can't afford health insurance. They can't even afford access to the medical care that their mother's DNA provided for other people who are richer and who can afford it. I think it's a fascinating story, and I think it's about time, it's beyond time that she is recognized for her contributions. And I believe her children have now been advocating for proper compensation. Their mother enabled this is multi-million, I think it's honestly a multi-billion-dollar industries and advancements. She should be compensated. And as she is no longer here, her family should be compensated for that. There's a full stop. Her family should be compensated. And I want to say it was at Johns Hopkins that this happened. Whatever medical facility this happened at has kind of just very much gone, it was for science, so they should just be grateful their mother contributed to science. As I understand it, again, I could be completely off base. I do need to actually go through and read this book. But something else that was really interesting to me that Jess pointed out is that this is who wrote this book. And if you can't tell, this is a white woman telling the story of this woman, who is a black woman. Jess talks about this in her kind of vlog and book review of this, of how she kind of felt conflicted about reading it, because is this story a story that is a white woman's to tell, But by the same token, she seems to do a very good job. She seems to be very respectful of the people and what happened. But also, it's Henrietta's children, or at least one specific child, who is working directly with her on this book and on finding out more about what happened and advocating for, apologies, acknowledgement, accountability, and compensation.
And so Jess was kind of conflicted about the fact that a white woman is telling the story of a black woman taken advantage of by obviously white male doctors. And I find that a really interesting intersection, and I'm really glad that Jess talked about that. I think it's a very important conversation to have, and I think it's something to keep in mind while you're reading it. Not to say that she doesn't have any right, especially when she's been contacted by Henrietta's family to engage her cooperation on this project, but to keep in mind during the reading of it, you know, I don't know how else to really put it. I don't know, maybe just in the hopes that the next time something like this comes to light, I'm not hoping that anything like this ever happens again, but you know that things like this have already happened. So maybe the next time something like this comes to light, it's not a white woman or a white man or somebody who it's not their story to tell that ends up helping the family tell their story. But that is not, there's no disrespect to the author, Rebecca Skloot, about this. I just think it's an interesting point to keep in mind while I go through and read this. So this was the very first little library book that I grabbed. Okay, so the next one that I have is The Girl on the Train. The reason that I picked this up is because during my voice coaching sessions, I want to say it was about halfway through, my voice coach asked if I had ever read the book or seen the movie, The Girl on the Train. And I was like, no. And she goes, good, that's perfect. She said, I'm going to be giving you a passage from this book that you are going to read as though you were doing an audiobook narration. And she said, the more blind you go into it, the better, because I want you to give your interpretation of it. She said it's actually a very pivotal scene in the movie, or it's a very memorable scene in the movie. And she said, and I don't want you mimicking it. I want this, you know, fresh from your perspective. So I was like, oh, okay, great. Yeah, I have no idea what this is. I did the read, that was my homework. And the next coaching session that I had, she listened to it. And I actually did 2 takes, and the first, well, I did a few, but I ended up giving her 2 versions of the recording. And I will say the first one that she listened to was my very first take. The second one that she listened to was probably my 3rd or 4th take that I had worked it. And she listened to it, and she actually closed her eyes while I was reading it. And then after the second take, she turned off the recording, and she was like, the second take was trying too hard. She said, but the first one, you nailed it. She said, it's so good, you could probably just grab that clip and use it as a professional demo already, which blew me away, because professional demos they're a big investment in time, a significant investment in money. You need a demo producer, you need a sound engineer, you know, a professional studio that you go and record in, you know, you need live direction, and then you need a sound editing team afterward to add the sound effects and do, you know, the cleanup and stuff. And so for her to say that my first recording, my very first take reading this, was good enough to use as a demo, and I would have to do a little sound editing and cleanup and maybe put in some sound effects, it really blew me away. It made me so happy, and it really also made me curious about the book. And then I forgot about it because I don't typically read thrillers. It just kind of fell off my radar. What has this been? About 6 months later now, 7 months maybe, from that happening, I come across this in a tiny library, and I'm like, okay, now I have to have it. I have to read this book. I have to find out what the rest of the story was, because the passage that I read was really intriguing. I think it must happen kind of early in the book, because from the sound of it, whoever the main character is, had not seen whatever it is she's supposed to see eventually. So anyway, I did pick up The Girl on the Train, and I'm very interested to read this and come across naturally that passage that I did super well on for my coaching. Okay, sorry. My oven timer went off, so I had to run downstairs and take something out of the oven. I've been cooking up a storm lately, and I wish I was doing more vlogging, because I would love to be including what I'm cooking. I'm making so many things. I was making Japanese curry. I made snickerdoodles that I have a really different, unique, I don't know, to me it's a unique take on. And then I experimented with a completely different take, and I was making Indian spice snickerdoodles. I make a breakfast, you know those like 7-layer dips? I make a layered dip, but it's not 7 layers, for my breakfast, because I was making a very specific breakfast and making it every single day. And now that I've been working out, I just don't have the time or the energy in the mornings if I'm gonna go do yoga in the mornings. Anyway, I've been cooking like a crazy person over the last 2 weeks, but having so much fun doing it because I have the energy to cook finally. It's so great not having a job. Eventually I will need money, but still, for now. Okay. So I have 2 other books. These 3 all came from the same tiny library. The next 2 are nonfiction though. So the first one that I grabbed was Nonviolent Communication, A Language of Life. What is violent communication? If violent means acting in ways that result in hurt or harm, then much of how we communicate, judging others, bullying, having racial bias, blaming, finger pointing, discriminating, speaking without listening, criticizing others, criticizing ourselves, name-calling, reacting when angry, using political rhetoric, being defensive, or judging who's good or bad or what's right or wrong with people could be considered violent communication. I don't typically read non-fiction because I don't typically find a use for it. I tend to find them very boring unless it's something I'm specifically trying to learn or specifically trying to get into or whatever. So we'll see how this goes. This is going in the list or in the pile of, oh my God, my cat is so freaking cute right now. Okay, sorry. My cats are so cute. This is going into the pile of voiceover books, which I actually am gonna have to grab because I do have one of those I want to show you too. So that is that, and I have to show you the cat. Okay, so there's 2, you can tell. There's my boy. There's my big scaredy boy. He's scared of everything. Can I get you a slow blink? I love you. Okay. But look at that little face. Look at her little face. She's so cute. She's also super fat. Anyway, adorable cat. She's very fat. Oh yeah, now she's looking at me. I'm sorry. You are. She goes back to sleep. I need to put her on a diet. So the next book that I grabbed is The Black Friend, on being a better white person. I love this title. So what really grabbed me on this was the blurbs in the jacket. So I'm just going to read it to you. We don't see color. I didn't know black people liked Star Wars. Ooh, what hood do you live in? Okay, those 3 right there. Before I read anything else, I'm like, oh God, this poor man. I need to read this. So, okay, continuing on. For Frederick Joseph, life as a transfer student in a largely white high school was full of wince-worthy moments that he often simply let go. As he grew older, however, he saw these as missed opportunities not only to stand up for himself, but to spread awareness to those white people who didn't see the negative impact they were having. Speaking directly to the reader, Frederick Joseph calls up race-related anecdotes from his past, explaining why they were hurtful and how he might handle things now. Each chapter features the voice of at least one artist or activist, from Angie Thomas, author of The Hate You Give, to April Rain, creator of #OscarsSoWhite, to Jamel Hill, sports journalist and podcast host, and 11 others. Touching on everything from cultural appropriation to reverse racism to white privilege, this book serves as conversation starter, toolkit, an invaluable window into the life of a former token black kid who now offers himself as the friend many readers need. I think everybody needs a black friend who will put you in your place and tell you when you're being just too white. This reminded me of 2 books that I've read. I want to say it was like 2 years ago now. White Privilege. I don't remember who wrote that one. I don't remember who wrote either of these, honestly, because I'm terrible at remembering author names. But White Privilege was one, and the other one was So You Want to Talk About Race. Both fantastic books. it's so important. And I think that they, like it says, it's a toolkit, and those books both have been toolkits for me. One, to look at myself and to recognize where, you know, as good as I think I'm doing, I am still very much white privilege blind, because that's simply my life experience, and I have to intentionally go out of my experience to educate myself and to make sure that I'm being better than what I am. Every day I want to be better than I was the day before. But it's also a toolkit for me to help talk to my friends and my family. What you said has an impact on people. Here's what you said. Here's what it feels like, or how it's taken by people. You know, it's about the impact to other people, and it's not about just you said something mean, you are wrong, you're a bad person. It's about, wow, you could really hurt somebody, or you are hurting somebody when you say something like that. And I think books like this help you have those conversations. So I'm excited to read this one by Frederick Joseph. Okay, we get to the final book. I feel like I've been talking way too much because I only have like 5 books. Okay, so the final book that I got is this behemoth by Stephen King. I did not know this book was so gigantic. And I read this, but I read this on my phone. And so I just had no clue. It was so freaking big. How big is this? It's 849 pages. That's a lot of pages. I mean, and I don't mind big books. You've seen Count of Monte Cristo, War and Peace are 2 of my all-time favorite books. Brothers Karamazov. I mean, like, I'm not scared of big books, but this, I just didn't know. I didn't know it was so big. However, I will say this. If you look at the font and like the spacing and stuff, it's nice for the size of the book, so that it's actually, you can go through it quickly. It's not like tiny script where it hurts your eyes and it's like, okay, this may have been printed on 848 pages, but it's basically like 1,200 or 1,500 pages worth. So, okay, anyway, this is the story. I don't even know how to describe it. Like, even the blurb doesn't even cover it. I love this book. I don't typically read Stephen King because I hate horror. Thrillers, it depends. I don't mind suspense, but I don't like gore. I don't like gratuitous violence or blood or, you know, violent imagery. I don't like it. I don't like supernatural things. I don't go there. Creeps me out. I get nightmares super easily. I just don't do it. However, Stephen King is a really good writer, in my opinion. I have read a few things from him that don't fall into the horror genre. When I read this blew me away. So this is basically an imagining of what would happen if JFK was not assassinated. But it's not so much, no, that's wrong. It's not even so much about what would the world be like if JFK hadn't been assassinated. It's what if you were given the chance to prevent the JFK assassination. So the guy in the book, I forget his name, and I even looked it up when I got the book and I don't remember, basically finds a rift in time and space and realizes it's like 2 years before JFK is assassinated. And so he kind of has to decide, should I stop it? And so what he ends up doing, what a lot of the focus of the book is, he then tracks down Lee Harvey Oswald because, 30 years in the future, 40 years in the future, you have the benefit of hindsight. So he knows everything there is to know about Lee Harvey Oswald. And the other thing about this rift in time, he can keep going back and forth. So what he does is he basically jumps back in time and he starts tracking down Lee Harvey Oswald because he has to positively assure himself that Lee Harvey Oswald is actually the killer. There are conspiracy theorists that he either wasn't the killer or that he wasn't alone. He was a fall guy. So he's like, if I'm going to kill somebody, if I'm going to take a human life, I have to know that this is the man and that he is evil and that he actually did this. So he spends a lot of time integrating into 1950s, in the 1950s, geez, the 1960s, be able to stealthily track Lee Harvey Oswald and really find out for himself. So there's also the subplot, which not even really a subplot, it turns out to be one of the big plot points, is he falls in love while he's back in time, but obviously can't tell the person that he's a time traveler. So, but it's very well done. Anyway, the whole story is very well done. I think Stephen King does a really good job with a personal relationship in here. The guy ends up going back and forth multiple times because he screws up, and so the rift that he ends up figuring out or finding out about takes him to the exact same moment. It is like 9 a.m, like June 4th, 1960 or something. Like, and then he goes back home. And I think he returns back home the exact moment that he left. So if he screws something up or, whatever, he just goes back to the rift, goes home, and then comes back. And then he's taken right back to the exact same moment and he can try it again. It was like a voluntary Groundhog Day kind of thing. And I love time travel, sci-fi, and all of that. I'm a huge Doctor Who fan. Some of my favorite Star Trek episodes are time travel episodes. I love The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. I love different theories about time travel and how time paradoxes can happen and how they can be avoided or addressed in the different theories. Anyway, I'm getting too nerdy. But yeah, so when I saw this in hardcover, I was like, oh my God, I have to get this because I have wanted to reread this. Now, I will also say part of the reason that this first intrigued me when it was released, but I just remember the story of my mom. She was a kid and she was in school and she remembered when the teacher came in crying, or the principal came in crying and told the teacher what had happened, and her male teacher started crying, which in 1963 is not something you saw very often. And they had to tell the class of, I don't know, 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, what had just happened. And it was traumatic. And then years later, I was in school when the planes hit the Twin Towers. And I heard it. And I had this weird flash of my mom telling me the story of JFK. And I knew, in that moment, I knew that this was one of those moments. Everyone who was alive past a certain age is going to remember this. They are going to know where they were. And they will be in their 80s and 90s. And if somebody asks them, where were you when the Twin Towers were hit? They will know. And for some reason, her story of it hit me in such an impactful way that even though I'm not going to be born for however many decades afterward, but the impact of somebody that I know, somebody so important to me, and to see how much it affected them, and years later, that memory, that core memory for them. So when I saw this book, I was like, this is something I want to experience. Don't regret it. Absolutely loved it. I would say at the time I probably would rate it 5 stars. So I am excited to reread this at some point and see if I would still give it 5 stars. I kind of think I would. I don't know. So that's it. That's the last of my mini book haul. So these are my little library books. And then I do have one more I'm just going to grab and show you super quick. Oops, I have 2 books. I totally forgot. This one I forgot about because it was on my bed because I keep meaning to read it. And I typically read in bed. This was the second book that I grabbed from a tiny library. I don't think I actually got that one on video. I think both of these were from tiny libraries that I may not have actually captured on video, but this one I feel like most people know about. This is The Maid. This was pretty big a couple years ago, I think. And I want to say it's a murder mystery. I don't know if she's suspected of the murder or she thinks the police are wrong or something, and then she tries to like solve it herself, or if she's trying to exonerate herself. But basically she's a maid, finds a dead body, and then ends up deciding it's up to her to solve the mystery. I believe that this is like super, super hyped at the time and people were absolutely loving it. I want to say I did see at least one review though that was like, this was pretty dumb. Like if you actually sit and think about it, it doesn't make any sense for this person to be doing this stuff. And then it like the required suspension of disbelief was too great for this person. So I'm gonna go into it assuming it'll be maybe a 3-star, which I think is still like, it's a good, enjoyable read, but it's just kind of middle of the road. So I don't have too high hopes for it, and I sometimes like it that way because then I can't be disappointed. Okay, then finally I got this book from Barnes & Noble. This is one that has been recommended to me by multiple voiceover coaches, and this is not specific to voice acting, but this is a classic, highly, highly, highly regarded book on acting in general. And this is from Sanford Meisner, and the book is just called On Acting. There's another book that I want to get. I think it's just called On Voice Acting or The Voice Actor or something, and it's actually by a voice actor, but I want to get the audiobook version. And I've actually heard from one of my coaches that the audiobook version is actually much better than the printed version because they have extra stuff in the audiobook. And when you're hearing an audiobook about acting, voice acting, like to hear it is so different than, you know, just to read it. So yeah, anyway, so these are my books. This is my pile. It is gonna fall. That is my little library tour. I actually would love to keep doing these because I keep finding tons and tons and tons of little libraries just being out and about. And there are some that I see frequently because I tend to drive by them, but I have not yet stopped. So if you like this video, please give this a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you're interested. Throw a comment down below and tell me what was the best tiny library you've ever come across. What did it look like? And what is the best book that you've ever found in a tiny library? I would love to hear other people's experiences with them. And hopefully I will be making more of these because as I keep driving around, I will keep visiting tiny libraries. So thank you very much for coming along and watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care of yourself, take care of each other, and I will see you in my next one. Bye. Such disapproval.